In the last video, we saw how the two-wheeler industry evolved from its humble beginning and grew rapidly, particularly after the Japanese joint ventures. While in the first decade of the new millennium, these joint ventures came under stress and the partnerships broke down, both Hero and TVS have continued to prosper and grow. The two-wheeler industry grew from a scale of 11.8 million units in FY 2011 to a peak of 21.2 million units in FY 2019. Thereafter, it saw a rapid decline in the next 3 years, collapsed to a low of 13.5 million units FY 2022. These have now started to make a steady improvement in the last 2 years or so. We will, in this video, examine the recent developments in the two-wheeler industry and also look at some of the other developments in the industry. While the event with the most significant economic impact has been COVID, the decline in the two-wheeler sales was subdued in FY20 even before the beginning of COVID. The growth of the industry happened on sharp rise of incomes, relatively stable prices, and availability of cheap financing options. These interest rates peaked sometime in 2019. Besides this, there were years with uneven growth in incomes between the rural and urban economies. Even before the onset of COVID-19 pandemic across the world and in India, the Indian economy was slowing down, with a real GDP growth rate of 4.7% in third quarter FY20. The GDP growth rate further fell to 3.1% in fourth quarter FY20, the lowest since 2008-2009 global financial crisis. The other reason for the decline in two-wheeler sales in the first 9 months of FY20 was also due to the launch of BS6 and consequent postponement of purchase decisions. Then, of course, after January 2020, COVID happened. The COVID-19 pandemic in India is a part of the worldwide pandemic of coronavirus disease 2019 caused by severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. The first cases of COVID-19 in India were reported on 30th of Jan 2020 in Kerala. Complete lockdowns were announced throughout the country by March 2020. The nationwide lockdown imposed across India to stop the spread of the coronavirus has led to widespread chaos and sufferings, especially among the country's 300 million poor. However, the fourth quarter FY20 growth rate only partly captures the impact of pandemic as the nationwide lockdown was announced on 24 March 2020. The impact was significant in first quarter FY21 as the entire country was almost in the lockdown phase for over 2 months to curb the spread of coronavirus. The motorcycle sales of most manufacturers in the country was zero for the month of April 2020. Even as the country saw some recovery and manufacturing and demand of two-wheelers, the overall sentiments for the year was subdued. Now let's talk about markets before. Two-wheeler sales have been on an increasing trend until FY 2019. The reasons for the same were the easier finance options, newer and fuel-efficient models, rising incomes in rural sectors, and even new business models such as e-commerce also purchased the sales as shown in table vehicle sales two-wheelers from FY 2011 to FY 2021, Statista 2021. The enormous government spending on projects and huge infrastructure, roads and rail development projects, and prompting more sales in rural sectors. In metros and large cities, the sales were aided by the large traffic. People brought two-wheelers for shorter commutes and errands, as it is difficult to move around in congested cities. Finding a parking space for a car is itself a difficult task. Even the premium segment has increased its portfolio in India. For the FY 2020, before we look at the impact of COVID, which was relevant in the last quarter, we must notice the sharp decline in the sales throughout the year. This year was the transition year from BS4 to BS6, so the production of BS4 models was stopped and most manufacturers shifted to BS6. This resulted in postponement of purchase decisions by many prospective buyers. The BS6 production for most manufacturers started towards the end of FY 2020. Also, the year saw increase in various commodity prices, including steel. The shift to BS6 also increased the prices of the vehicles by 8 to 10% or more in many cases. Some of this was on account of higher usage of exotic materials such as palladium. Now let's discuss the COVID-19 impact. COVID-19 has brought the two-wheeler industry to a major halt. Governments throughout the world were forced to put lockdowns on personal and commercial life for more than 2 months in year 2020. As customers were not purchasing new vehicles, the two-wheeler industry faced a major blow to the business and sales. Domestic sales impact. The Indian government decided to curb the spread of COVID-19 throughout lockdowns. The economy stopped at once. For two-wheeler industry, all factories, vendors, suppliers, dealers, etc. were closed for approximately 2 months. The sales from Table 1 two-wheeler domestic sales comparison year over year clearly shows the impact on the industry due to COVID-19 in financial year 2020-2021 as compared to sales in FY 19-20. The major market players such as Hero MotoCorp and HMSI suffered huge losses in sales figure. Hero MotoCorp suffered more than 10% loss in sales, whereas HMSI suffered a loss of 17%. The sales on the overall two-wheeler market decreased by 13%. These declines were on an already subdued number in FY 20, where most companies saw a decline in the range of 10% to 15% or more. This decline in sales continued in FY 22. The decline in FY 22 may have been equally on account of supply chain issues as much as demand-related issues. Export sales impact. The impact on export sales was similar to the impact on domestic. The overall growth was negative in the export market too. Negative growth of 7% was seen in export market majorly due to global shutdowns due to COVID in many parts of the world. Bajaj sales fell by 4% and HMSI sales fell by more than 35%. Yamaha and Suzuki also saw a decline in 35%. Supply chain impact. Both India and the rest of the world took a negative hit that has caused long-term effects on almost all businesses. For many of the shipping routes, the shipping rates had gone up by 5 times. Further, there were areas where there were port congestions due to problem in unloading and loading and accumulation of containers, etc. The two-wheeler industry was severely impacted on account of these supply chain disruptions. There were disruption in OEM's supply chain management due to supply chain breakdown emanating from China, South Korea, USA, UK, France, etc. Two-wheelers faced an imminent raw material and component shortage, especially from China. This had hampered the production schedules of companies. The import dependency is higher in the two-wheeler segments as more than 4/5 of the imported components in two-wheelers are from China. About 20% of the auto sector and 30% of the tire industry are dependent on China for their parts and raw materials. Wuhan in itself, an auto hub, and many OEMs and suppliers are directly dependent on Wuhan for their production. OEM suppliers have faced a liquidity crunch during the lockdown periods. A news report in the Economic Times say that Hero Motocorp, Honda Motorcycles and Scooter India, Suzuki Motorcycle India, Yamaha, Bajaj Auto and Royal Enfield ensure payments to suppliers amid the lockdown, causing huge losses because of no sales and paying up for the operational cost. Apart from this, there were a huge global shortage of semiconductors. Semiconductor manufacturers were often not able to commit deliveries for fresh orders for as long as 1 year. Further, the semiconductor prices also rose by 2 to 3 times. This adversely impacted the Indian automobile industry. Many of the functions of the two-wheelers are from ignition to safety locks to instrument display are increasingly often electronic and need semiconductor. Further, since a lot of Indian bikes were cheaper bikes under 125cc, the increase in prices of semiconductors impacted these bikes disproportionately. Apart from the increase in prices, there was an issue of availability of semiconductors. So many of the two-wheeler manufacturers started prioritizing the manufacture of high-end, heavier bikes. The motorcycle industry seems to be on the path of recovery and saw a small increase in volumes. Further, this trend has continued in the current financial year. The two big sub-segments which have become prominent is the slightly heavier bikes and the electronic vehicles. Starting from this, but also due to increased per capita incomes post-COVID, we have also started seeing an increase premiumization of bikes. Almost everyone has noticed the sharp rise in profitability of Royal Enfield motorcycles. With an intent to cash in on this trend, most two-wheeler companies have introduced mid-weight motorcycle bikes. This is going to continue. For instance, the share of 150cc plus bikes in India may have gone up to 18% plus from under 14% just before COVID. This trend is likely to continue. The most important trend in the recent years in the two-wheeler industry has, of course, been the rapid growth of the EV industry post-COVID. While EVs were present in India for a long time and were primarily low speed, less than 25 kilometers per hour, and required no license or registration, these entry-level EVs were very popular among school students and senior citizens. Generally, these vehicles were very light with an all-plastic build and were made locally by small, relatively unknown manufacturers. However, the EV industry started to change around the early 2010s, primarily driven by the collective voice for phasing out of fossil fuels, as well as the Indian government's policies driven towards cleaner mobility. Since 2014, the Indian market for electric scooters and motorcycles has grown steadily. Electric scooters and motorbikes sold 152.0 thousand units in 2019, up 20.6% from 2014. By the end of 2025, it is expected that annual retail sales will have reached 1,080.5 thousand units with a CAGR of 57.9% between 2020 and 2025 forecast period. Meanwhile, retail sales are anticipated to exceed $1.0 billion by 2025, representing a CAGR of 63.9% between 2020 and 2025. Two-wheelers are India's most popular vehicle type, accounting for 70% of the country's 200 million vehicles on the road and 80% of new vehicle sales each year. Electric motorcycles and scooters are plug-in electric vehicles with two or three wheelers. Power is supplied by a rechargeable battery that drives one or more electric motors. Electric scooters are distinguished from motorcycles by having a step-through frame instead of being straddled. Electric bikes are similar vehicles distinguished by retaining the ability to be propelled by the rider pedaling in addition to battery propulsion. In January 2013, the Indian government announced a plan to provide subsidies for hybrid and electric vehicles. The plan will have subsidies of up to rupees 1,50,000, approximately 2,200 US dollars for cars and rupees 50,000 for two-wheelers. India aimed to have 7 million electric vehicles on the road by 2020. But the scheme was launched in April 2019 by the name of FAME, or Faster Adoption and Manufacturing of Hybrid and Electric Vehicles. According to Auto News sources, electric two-wheeler sales recorded 305% year-over-year growth, with 6 lakhs electric bikes and scooters sold in 2022. Modern electric bikes and scooters generally use a lithium-ion battery pack as the power source for the electric motor. The competitive landscape of the electric two-wheeler market, E2W, is giving consumer better options in terms of pricing, vehicle type, the set of features, and more. The growth of the two-wheeler industry in India continued into the middle of calendar year 2023. The industry saw a sharp decline in numbers after the subsidy under FAME 2 was withdrawn in July 2023. The government is considering a new version of this subsidy to provide a continued impetus to the sales of EVs. Further, charging stations are being put rapidly all over the country. We have done detailed videos on the EV industry and another one on the government incentives. You will find the links to these videos in the description box. Now let's discuss about the key players. Ola Electric accounted for the largest number of EV sales and has set up the world's largest two-wheeler factory in Tamil Nadu with an annual production capacity of 10 million units. Ola Electric currently has 3 e-scooters for sales in the Indian market. Okinawa Auto Tech is a Gurgaon-based electric two-wheeler manufacturing company established in 2015. The company's product portfolios include lithium-ion high-speed OKHI 90i Praise Plus, Praise Pro, Dual 100, etc. Lithium-ion low-speed R30 and light. Hero Electric is a part of India's biggest two-wheeler manufacturer, Hero MotoCorp. Hero Electric has been able to cross the 1 million unit sales mark in 2022 and 2023 as well. The company currently has 5 e-scooters and 1 e-cycle in its line. Ampere Vehicles is the country's 4th biggest two-wheeler seller and is owned by Greaves Cotton, which is an Indian engineering company specializing in engine and heavy equipments. Ampere Electric currently has 2 scooters up for grabs. Ather Energy occupied the 5th position in the list of India's top-rated electric two-wheeler companies. The startup was founded in 2013 by Tarun Mehta and Swapnil Jain. Ather is known for building fast and intelligent electric scooters, including the Ather 450X and the Ather 450 Plus. The company is also establishing Ather Grid, the electric vehicle charging infra across the country. Other smaller players include Obain Electric, Revolt Motors, Torque Motors, Bajaj, TVS Motors, and Simple Energy. Market post-COVID. Indian two-wheeler industry has changed significantly post the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to chip shortage and disruption of global supply chain issues, the dynamics of market has changed considerably. All major two-wheeler players in India are going for the premiumization, and the same can be observed in the EVs too. Rising input costs and low availability of semiconductors had pushed the price of many entry-level bikes and scooters. OEMs are finding it hard to maintain their margin on the budget offering, and hence the market is seeing more mid to high segment launches. Even the likes of Hero and Bajaj, who typically target in the computer segment, are going all out for premium motorcycles in the 200 to 450cc segment. It makes economic sense as well for the automakers, as with limited available resources, they are going for the most profit rich product rather than focusing on sheer sales volumes. They are focusing more on the bottom line. Even the consumers' preferences have changed, and the premium bikes are very well received in the market. And almost all new offerings from the established players have waiting period ranging from a few weeks to almost 2 to 3 months. It needs to be seen when and how the entry level vehicles are going to see new product launches, and also give the rural consumption numbers aren't too optimistic. It would be difficult for automakers to jump back into the 100 to 150cc segment with cutthroat competition. In the current year, we have seen most two wheeler manufacturers see a jump in profitability and volumes. This may continue in the coming years, even as the focus in coming years may be on EVs and premium vehicles.